Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I am not Martha Garner. My name is David Hoover. I am the president of the Northeast chapter of Louisiana Master Naturalists. And I'd like to welcome you all to our first Spider Zoom workshop. I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today, Dr. Aimée Thomas. She's Associate Professor of Biological Sciences at Loyola University. And she is an expert on spiders and insect pollinators in urban landscapes, which could be a fascinating workshop in itself. She's been involved in a number of projects like the Outside Project to improve content knowledge and stimulate people to interact with nature, middle school students especially. And she co-leads tropical ecology study trips abroad to Belize, Guatemala, Ecuador, and the Galapagos Islands. All wonderful places that I'd really love to go, and we'd have to ask her more about those things sometime. I'd also like to make everyone aware of the Spiders of Louisiana Weekend Spider Blitz on iNaturalist. Our members, if they want to count this as a project, will need to go to that and contribute. And we can help you sign up for iNaturalist if you're not already signed up for it. And there is a link in the chat, in the group chat here, with the to the project. And now I'd like to turn it over to Aimée, and we'll just hear all about whatever we can learn about spiders.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to give you my screen so that you can all look at some photos and tell you some stories about these incredible critters that many people revile. They're considered reviled, but of course I'm passionate about them. And so I appreciate you asking me to come and speak about Louisiana spiders, because it's a fun topic to talk about. There's always something new to learn. There's so much cool natural history that goes along with learning just about spiders in general. And as you all know, as master naturalists, the way you learn is by getting out in nature and by observing and then reading and then observing and doing all kinds of cool stuff. So they definitely weave a vital web of life for sure. And so I'm excited to talk about that with you today. So just a little bit of background, because people always ask me how I got to where I am and how I chose spiders. And I went to undergraduate school at the University of Southern Mississippi, so not far from where I grew up in New Orleans. And I knew I wanted to be a biologist. That was, in my blood growing up as the daughter of the founding director of the Louisiana Nature Center. I was out there all the time and just always in nature, always playing with bugs and things like that. And so I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do with it, but I also was passionate about tennis. And so I was at Southern Miss on a tennis scholarship. So here I am back in the day, as I like to call it. And so it was kind of an anomaly for an athlete to also want to hold critters like amphisbaenas and be in the beta biology society. And so then those folks thought, oh, well, you're an athlete. That's weird. Most scientists aren't that. So I thought, okay, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I love. This is what I'm passionate about. And lo and behold, it's what I think led me into my career. And it has to do with the fact that I was on the tennis team and our practice was in the afternoon. And as a science major in my sophomore year, I had to start finding all of these classes with labs, and most of the labs were in the afternoon. But there was one that was on in the morning where I could actually fit it into my schedule. And it happened to be arachnid biology. And from there, I was just hooked. So I went to graduate school and worked with this awesome professor, Fred Howell, who mentored me. And he got a really great grant from the Department of Defense to study macroinvertebrates. And so it's where I learned about the aquatic macroinvertebrate community. And so if you didn't know, I'm also a Louisiana Master Naturalist. I'm a founding member of the Greater New Orleans chapter and a founding board member. And so one of the workshops that I teach for our participants is at Turtle Cove, which is on the western part of the Lake Pontchartrain Basin. And it's at that workshop where I teach about aquatic macroinvertebrates. And I learned it all as a graduate student studying spiders and also doing research on macroinvertebrates. So my focus for my thesis was on this critter right here. And so this is a really cool picture, I think. It doesn't include the entire body, but it focuses in on the part of the body that I want to show you. And this is the species of fishing spider we have throughout the state. And so it's one of the, as I go through this talk, I want to introduce you to spiders in general and then talk about specific species that we have and for you to look at. So I'll start with my baby, as I call it, the Dolomedes vittatus, which is a spider that is just known commonly as a fishing spider, no specific name. And it has a diagnostic characteristic triangle shape on its head region. And so that's how you would, well, and it's also about the size of a dinner plate. So with its legs spread out. So you probably wouldn't miss it. They're really cool critters and are known to eat fish and other critters that fall into the water. But one of the questions we had, we saw them in association with larval salamanders a lot. And larval salamanders resemble, falsely resemble these little small fishes that they are known or have been known to eat. And so our question was, are they actually going to eat them, and do the larval salamanders adjust their behaviors? And they did not, and we think it was something chemical, but that was for a future study that I never got to. So throwing that out there for others. So that led to my first job as a professor at the University of Southern Mississippi, where I ended up getting my Ph.D. And once I finished that, I moved on to, luckily, Loyola University, New Orleans, where I feel like I'm lucky to have a great job in a great city and get to work with incredible students where I can share my passions. So these are just a couple of photos. During the pandemic, we were still able to get out in the field and do some really cool environmental justice work with some local organizations. And then also, anytime I have the opportunity to go out and do field trips at night during the day, I take students along, and sometimes it's with the class, sometimes it's just for fun. But I definitely love being a part of the Master Naturalist community because I get to continue to learn and be challenged by questions from people in the community and get asked questions about, what's this spider? What's this insect? What's this behavior? What did I observe this weekend? And all kinds of great things. So it bodes well for me and my passion for academia and continuing to learn. So that's just a little bit of background of how I got to where I am. Before I get into the spiders, I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute to show you, for those of you who, if you haven't done a workshop where you've learned about getting out and finding the creepy crawlies, whatever you want to call them. In my case, the spiders and the insects, you have to have certain equipment. So if you haven't ever gotten a loupe that is just a tiny magnifying glass, this is definitely something you're going to want to have, because what we're going to talk about today, even though that one spider I've already shown you is on the large size, most of these organisms are pretty small. And so it's an opportunity to slow down, to make keen observations, and to really take your time and look at nature up close with the help of certain things like a magnifying glass, or a loupe as we call them. And then of course the other tricks of the trade in the spider world is having really good, let's see if I can show y'all this well. I'll get rid of my blur. So having books that are good, and some of them are very thick and heavy, and you don't want to take them in the field, like this one, and then my Bible, as I call it, that sits on my coffee table. And so really great books to have. This is a hardback, not as thick, but really good book with lots of great photos for identification. But going along with the theme for this weekend of having the iNaturalist BioBlitz, this is also a great thing to take into the field, because with this, you can identify now in real time using things like Seek by iNaturalist, and Google Lens and all kinds of different apps. There are even apps on here now that you can download for free that are magnifying lenses. Of course, I don't even carry a camera in the field anymore. This is my camera. So it's also my excuse to get the most updated phone so I can have good pics. But anyway, that's kind of the tricks of the trade of what you would need. There's also a handheld, a small laminated field guide that you can take with you specific to the Spiders of Louisiana. I was going to grab it before I came, but we were locked out of our offices from Wednesday on because of the hurricane. So, but if you just go to Barnes & Noble, any local bookstore, Amazon, you can find, it's just a pamphlet that's laminated. You can take in the field with you, much smaller in size, doesn't weigh much at all. And that's also a great guide for you when you're in the field. Okay, so let's get to the meat of what this talk is about, and it's about Louisiana spiders. Specifically, though, we've got to understand where these critters fit in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about organisms and trying to understand what a spider is. So for those of you who already know, I hope this doesn't dumb it down for you, but I think it's worth starting with our taxonomy. And we probably all know that these are kingdom Animalia, or animals, right? So if we narrow in on trying to figure out where spiders fit, they are a member of the phylum Arthropoda. And that word, big fancy word, but a great word that's incredibly descriptive for the group of critters you see on the screen right now. So the word breaks down. I'm a big proponent of trying to understand root words, because once you understand root words, you understand a whole lot more vocabulary, which means you understand a whole lot more content eventually. And so this word breaks down into arth, which is Greek for a joint, and then pod, which is Greek for a foot or appendages. So we have jointed appendages. Our fingers are jointed appendages, our elbows, our wrists, our shoulders. We have jointed appendages all over our bodies. And one of the things that separates the arthropods in their lineage is the fact that they have these jointed appendages, which allow for movement that hadn't been seen in the animal kingdom before then, when they evolved. The other shared characteristics I have listed for you at the bottom that are important to understand. These are the shared characteristics of all the organisms in this group. First of all, an exoskeleton. Exo means outer. Skeleton is well, y'all know what skeleton means, but it means they have the skeleton on the outside. There are lots of pros and cons of having an exoskeleton. A pro being it serves as protection. A con being it restricts growth. And so in order to grow, an arthropod has to remove its outer skeleton and grow a new one. And so that's often associated with vulnerability. Or if you live in South Louisiana, for us, it's like, oh, soft shell crab. So a crab is an arthropod. And when a crab molts, it removes its exoskeleton. And before we, as humans, have given it the opportunity to regrow or allow that exoskeleton to harden, we take those crabs, we butter them, we batter them, we fry them and eat them, and they are delicious. So anyway, there's a lot more to that story, but that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of what an exoskeleton is. I mentioned their jointed appendages. So the third characteristic that they all share is that all arthropods have segmented bodies. With an insect, that would be the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. With the other arthropods have different combinations of the three different segmented bodies. So if we narrow down into just specifically the arthropods that are arachnids, the next taxonomic level, for those of you who like organization and taxonomy and classification, we would move into and narrow down to class Arachnida. Now that removes all the insects, that removes all the crustaceans, etc., from this discussion. It includes things that we're probably familiar with, like scorpions, and maybe daddy longlegs that are shown here. The formal name for them is harvestmen, mites and ticks, and of course the spiders, and some lesser known pseudoscorpions, sun spiders, whip scorpions, and some others. What these critters all share in common, even though the word arachnida is derived from the Greek arachne, which means a spider, is that they all have 8 walking legs. So that's, you can see the distinction between the spiders and insects, between the spiders and crustaceans and crabs and things like that. They also have what are known as chelicerae and pedipalps, which I'll explain in a minute, but those are characters. I want to show you pictures as I explain those to you. And then if we're keeping consistent with looking at body segments, one of the reasons that early taxonomists group these together is these all have what are known as 2 body regions. So moving on from here to get a little more specific to spiders, and I'll get back to those characters in just a minute, we would focus in then on the next classification level. So kingdom, phylum, class, order. All of the spiders are found within the order Arachnia or Araneae, depending on how you might pronounce that, which is derived from Araneae, which is Latin for a spider. And so that removes scorpions, ticks, mites, etc., from the discussion. And so this is the group that we will focus on for the rest of this talk, is order Araneae or Araneae, however you want to pronounce it. In this group, just to give you a kind of a conceptual understanding of where they fit, you can, people always want to know, well, how speciose are they? How diverse are they? Well, it depends on what book you're using. And so one of the places that I go for the most up-to-date material, because once something's in print, of course, we know it's archaic at this time, but one of the places you can go to see in real time how many families, how many species there are worldwide of spiders is the World Spider Catalog. And I have it referenced over here to the right. This is where any scientist who publishes anything about spiders contributes information to this World Spider Catalog. And I put the website up here if anybody's interested in going to it. Last night, I got the most up-to-date data for you for the talk. So I accessed it last night. And so as of last night, there were, and I'm going to say give or take 135 families, because there's still discussion and debate in the scientific community as to how many there are. So that would be the number of families of order Araneae. And then next in line taxonomically are the genera, but we'll just skip right to the species. Worldwide, as of last night, there are 52,311 species worldwide. You go to those books that I showed you earlier, and it estimates there's about 46,000 species. So it updates on a regular basis, and there's lots of exploration going on in places like Borneo, Guyana, Madagascar, places like that, where they're constantly finding new species that have never been described. So just to give you a kind of a concept of that information. All right, narrowing down to North America, there's about 4,000 species here. That number fluctuates, of course, depending on the publication that comes out. I was on the phone with my buddy, Zach Lemon. Some of y'all probably know Zach. He's an incredible scientist, natural history biologist who works for Audubon. And we're always chatting about spiders and insects and things like that. So I was asking him, I said, how many spiders do you think are in Louisiana? And there's one publication that came from Northwest Louisiana, for those of you in that chapter. Lawrence Hardy published probably 20 or so years ago a checklist of Louisiana that has about 300 or so species on it, and an update to that about 14 or 15 years ago that adds to it. Best guess estimate, there's probably about, we think about 350 species in Louisiana, which is about 10% of, or a little less than 10% of what we would expect. And so it's a question mark. It's amazing that we don't know this, but things like what y'all are doing today and this weekend with the BioBlitz contribute to that information. I have a publication about an ogre-faced spider or a castnut spider that came from citizen science, or part of it came from citizen science sourced information from iNaturalist. So there's my plea to you all. Add as much as you can anytime you see a spider, even if you don't know what it is, add it to iNaturalist, because that's how people who are interested in identifying species and knowing how many are in a state like a lot of naturalists are, definitely helps us out. So I appreciate that. Before I move on, just this graph to the right shows you the number of currently valid species is the dot there, but it shows you over time from when we started keeping records of this, how many species are described each year. So the last update from 2024 is this dot right here, and it's close to 1,000 species. So it's pretty incredible. As technology has improved, we continue to improve our ability to identify these cool critters. So just a little background to get us rolling. All right, now the fun stuff. Let's look at spiders in particular, and specifically right now about their anatomy, because this is one of the things that defines spiders. It tells us, who they are, what they are, where they fit in the context of other animals, other arthropods, other arachnids. And so here's some great pictures that some of these I've taken. If there's no citation next to it, it means it's my photo, but give credit where credit is due. They have two distinct body divisions. So these two terms right here, cephalothorax and abdomen. I think y'all recognize abdomen because that's pretty well known. We consider our rear region our abdomen. On insects, that's their rear region as well. The difference here between insects, just to compare to something that we're more, usually tend to be more familiar with, the head and the thorax are fused. And so in a spider, it makes up this one other division or body division known as a cephalothorax. So it's a fusion of the head region, and cephalo means head. Specifically, it means when you have a concentration of your nervous system positioned in this region, and then also the thorax. So that would be in an insect, the middle portion of their body. So a cephalothorax. We already mentioned about the 8 walking legs, so 4 pairs of walking legs. So this is where I want to get a little more specific for you. I mentioned chelicerae. So here, let me explain what these are. This is looking on at the face of a cast net spider, or what's also known as an ogre spider. And you can see right here, these big eyes in the front. That is just a little natural history, for all you naturalists out there. Usually when you see that, it is the sign of something that is a hunter. So like, most predators have their binocular vision, or their eyes in the front of their heads. But the interesting thing in spiders' case is most spiders have 8 eyes. So yes, they do have this set of eyes in the front that are these binocular for hunting vision. But here's an eye right here. There's an eye, and then they're all paired. So here's the other one, here's the other one. So that's 6. And then further back on the top of their cephalothorax, there's another set of eyes. And so that is pretty common. We see that in a lot of the spiders. Here's just to give you another look. This one only shows you 4 eyes. The other 4 are in the back. And I'll show you a different view of that in just a minute. But that is a sign of something that is an active hunter. Okay, so that pairs nicely with chelicerae, which are the mouth parts. So when you know that, you see right here, this is the base of the mouth part. And then, of course, what we always think of with spiders is the way in which they grab their food or they eat, which are their fangs. So this professionally taken picture has the fangs extended out, so you can really see it. It's really enhanced. The picture over to the right of this jumping spider shows you the base of the mouth parts and the fangs inside of its prey item at this point. So it's got it inside of the prey. So those are the chelicerae, or the mouth parts. Just a little side note of this for those of you interested in engaging deeper or have experience with tarantulas, one of the characteristics that separates the more primitive spiders, tarantulas, with the newer spiders, the non-tarantulas, is the way that their fangs go into the prey. So I don't know if y'all can see me on your screen, but the primitive spiders do their fangs up and down like this, whereas the more modern spiders are the ones that are derived, come in from the side. So this is coming in from the side, so they would bend in this direction. And there's a lot more to that story. If we ever do a spiders, advanced spiders of Louisiana, I can share more of that story. Okay, other thing I want to show you on this slide is this, the pedipalps. So they also, everything is paired, if you haven't noticed that. They have a pair of what are known as pedipalps. Pedipalps look a lot like antennae. Spiders don't have antennae. They have what are known as pedipalps, which serve a similar function. So the picture at the top, you can kind of see it's segmented here. The picture at the bottom, you can see the segments, the actual photo. And then over to the right, these are the pedipalps on the jumping spider. So they serve similar purpose and function as antennae, but they do more. So one of the things that antennae do and that pedipalps do is they sense surroundings. So you'll see spiders move their pedipalps around to sense their surroundings. They also will use their pedipalps to hold prey in place. But the cool thing is when it comes to reproduction, they use them in a certain way. So I'm going to save that story for a little later, but I want to just point out right here in the ogre-faced spider, the tips of the pedipalps here are swollen, and there's a reason for that. So I'll leave you hanging there for a minute. That's your little tease for how they serve to in reproduction. This is a photo that shows a microscopic version of the chelicerae. This not showing the entire basal section, but this would be the basal section of it with the hairs around for sensing. Some spiders have these extra pieces of their exoskeleton, people call them teeth, to help hold prey in place as well. But the really cool thing here I want to show you are the fangs and how, first of all, they're retrograde, or they go in like this, but also right here, you can see an opening, and that is where the venom would come out of the fang to be injected into the prey. To a really cool comparison of what you just saw in that chelicera is we call it biomimicry. So when humans mimic things in nature, biomimicry, it's because it's an incredible character or function in an organism. So if you see right here from left to right, this is an example of humans mimicking biology, in this case, the fang of a spider. So this is a hypodermic needle enlarged for the photo. This is comparing to something else that might have been the model for this hypodermic needle, a viper, and where the venom might come out of a viper fang. This is, again, a look at a fang from a spider. So you can see not as enlarged teeth from the exoskeleton, but certainly something there to help with holding prey in place. And of course, the opening right here. And then this is an example of the tail of a scorpion and how scorpion would release their venom. So just some really cool pictures, not my photo. A little bit more as far as their morphology, their anatomy, that I think is cool and that separates them from other arachnids and other arthropods is the fact that they have structures known as spinnerets. And from those spinnerets, let's just use the word again, they spin webs. And what they use to spin the webs is silk. And so let you orient yourselves to this new image at the top, which has a lot more detail than I'm going to go into. Again, this is something for Spiders Advanced, but just to show you a couple of things related to what I just talked about and then make connections. I just showed you the chelicerae. So I'm outlining with my pointer here the basal part of the chelicera, and then the fang down here. And you can see that there is a poison gland in the head region, in the cephalothorax, that would release the venom when a spider needs it to subdue its prey. So I think that's pretty cool. Another thing I've mentioned are the eyes. So this shows you one side of the body and the 4 eyes in the spider. And then if we go to the abdomen, a couple of really neat things, and I'm happy to revisit this if y'all want to go into more detail, but let me focus on the spinnerets and the silk. Anatomically, they have these structures that are on the outside of the body that are connected to the silk glands on the inside of the body. So the structures are called spinnerets. And so you can see how they come out of the rear, or the rear of the abdomen, and they're positioned differently depending on the species, but nonetheless, they connect to silk glands. So all of these, the green parts right here, are the glands that produce the different proteins that contribute to the silk. Okay, let's leave it at that just for now. I'm going to show you a little more detail. But if you look at the bottom pictures, I just chose a few photos to show you. First of all, you can't really see the spinnerets here, but you can see the silk coming out and the spider's leg guiding or pulling the silk out as she's building her web. This middle picture is, and this is an orb weaver that we have around here. I'll talk about her eventually. This is a spider I'm just going to show you here because I don't think we have them in Louisiana. I've seen these in the tropics when I've traveled to the tropics. I could be wrong, so I've never seen them here. If you've seen one of these, please tell me. This is a lichen spider, and it is a cool photo to show you here because this is an example of extreme spinnerets that come out of the abdomen of this spider. And also, I mean, really cool camouflage and mimicry here of the lichen on the surrounding tree. The picture to the right is another example of this species to the left, another orb weaver. And in this one, you can really see the silk coming out of the spinnerets and the spider using her leg and claws at the end to help her form the web as she's building it. If you have never watched a spider build a web, you do yourselves a favor and do it. Or if you aren't patient enough to sit there and watch them for 30, 45 minutes, because it does take a while, get online. You can see some that are kind of sped up, but it is impressive. It's amazing. And one of the reasons it's so incredible, and we're learning more and more about this in the spider world, is what we've learned in the past, I don't know, probably 10, 20 years, is about the different silk glands that produce the different kinds of silk. In other words, the silk that has different jobs, if you want to think of it like that. So this photo right here comes from the Spite. You can see the website at the bottom left, spiber.se, and it's from a paper that was published just recently that color codes these different silk glands so you can see that what they're producing is for different purposes. So let me just pick a couple to show you. One, if you didn't know, all spiders have silk and all spiders use silk. They don't all live in a silken web, but they use it in some kind of a way. Like, let me give you an example, tarantulas. Tarantulas' bodies are way too heavy to live on a web. And so, but that doesn't mean they don't use them. They will use the silk to make a nice bed in their retreat. They will use silk to, in this case, I'm going to just outline the wrap up and protect an egg sac. They will use silk for covering their retreat to keep potential predators out, etc. Now, the spiders that you see in webs all the time, of course, they're using silk to do the same things, to line and protect their retreats, but it's in a different form. It's a different fashion. They also use it to create and to wrap, in most cases, their egg sacs. But let's use this blue color here. This right here, there's a certain gland, and we don't need to get into, you know, the names of the different. If you want to study that deeper, definitely go to that website because there's a lot more to this story. But if you just follow this color, you can see that one of the things that this color web does is make this outer portion of their silken retreat or their web, but also the core fibers of the capture spiral as listed right here, which is the part of the web that they would use to actually capture their prey. And then other parts of it would be this, if you follow this purple, or this, I guess it's more of a pinkish color here, that would be a different kind of silk, not only structure, but also function in the web. And so you can see it would be the auxiliary spiral, probably just like as a backup support system. So, I mean, unbelievable, really cool. If you just Google lots of things about webs and how they use their webs, you can see all kinds of cool things. There's lots of studies being done. The technology has really advanced. This is a study that came out just recently that shows high-speed photography of this specific type of jumping spider, and it shows it leaping across just a very small 3-centimeter gap, but it shows you what, in the case of a jumping spider, would do to with its silk, other than wrap up its egg sac. Jumping spiders don't live typically in a web. They'll sometimes make a silken retreat over themselves when they're resting, but their main purpose, what they use it for a lot, is getting from place to place. And so this picture, high-speed photographs all aggregated together, shows you what the spider would do, which she would, or he would attach its silk to a structure and then jump across whatever gap it needs to jump across. And it would use this as the silk as if it misses its target, it would not fall to the ground and risk breaking its exoskeleton, which leads to death in spiders. And so it would be its backup plan if it doesn't hit its mark. So I think and there's all kinds of cool stuff you can look at, but this was one that's recently came out. I thought I'd share with you all. A little bit more on silk and another study that came out probably about, I can't remember. Let me see if I have the citation here. Yes, in 2017, this came out in Science Magazine, which is a really good source. So you don't have to get too much of the technicalities that went into the study, but it does a really nice job of teaching you the major outcomes of this work. And this one's really cool. It goes into the biochemistry of the silk, which I am not a biochemist. I don't pretend to be. But the really cool thing that I'll just point out is at the very bottom, you can see a little window in a larger version of the spinnerets, and the different spinneret, or what are known as the spigots, where the actual silk is pulled out. And then again at the top, it shows you the color coding, the names of the different types of silk, and then the color coding in the abdomen of the spider. Now that's cool in and of itself, but what it leads to is this. This is part of that study and that description in Science Mag that shows you how a spider web and the different proteins and silk glands perform, I should say, different functions. So some of it is actually held together in a form like a zipper. And y'all know how strong zippers are and why they work so efficiently. So some of the silk comes out into something that is so strong, but not just strong, flexible. And so that is one of the things that makes spider silk unique and valuable to humans. And it's the reason why so many people are trying to synthesize it right now in their labs. In fact, there's some work being done in Wyoming where they're injecting the spider silk protein into goats, and then extracting out that and getting the goat to use its own DNA and cellular processes to make more of the silk, and then they're extracting it out of the goat's milk, like, and trying to use it in different medicinal purposes, like for wound care, but also making structures out of it, beautiful, incredibly detailed and strong yet soft materials as well. So if you're interested in those things, you can Google about synthesizing spider silk and read all kinds of cool stuff. So any more detail on that is pretty advanced, but I just wanted to show you that because people always want to know, why spiders don't get stuck in their own webs. Well, this is the reason why, is because they have these different proteins that produce different kinds of silk that have different functions and performance, and it's all because of the glands that they have on their insides that continues to make these different sophisticated proteins. Cool. Okay. Speaking of silk, these are just some photos that I've taken over the years of this particular spider that you probably will recognize as, a lot of people call this a crab spider. The scientific name is in the bottom right on a picture that was taken by our very own Steve Wolf, who's in my chapter. And this is a Gastrocantha cancroformis is the scientific name. If you don't love scientific names, this is one you can actually love, because Gastrocantha means stomach crab and cancroformis means crab-like. And so that's why people call these crab spiders, even though after today, you can't call them that anymore. From now on, you need to call them spiny orb weavers, because this is one of our most common spiders that we have in the state. And it is very different from an actual crab spider. So more on that in a minute. Here is an adult female right here at the very top. And you'll see them in white with black, orange with black, red with black. And this to the right is the male. Look how much smaller he is in relation to her. So I have these in my yard. These are two pictures of egg sacs that are on the bottom of a holly tree and on one of my irises right here. And then, of course, you can see the one that Steve got on his car. But this is, if you watch them, if you have them in your yard, this is the way, of course, the best way naturalists learn is just by constant observation. Well, I had always seen the females, and I had looked at the males in the book, but I was like, I never see the males. Well, I did not have a clue how small they actually were. And then I read in something that they usually, when you see them, they're hanging straight down close to the web, and it's just like it looks like just a blob of black at the end of it. And that's the male biding his time, waiting for the female to be receptive and to mate. So hopefully now that I tell you that, and you go and you look at these, you'll be able to spot the females and the males and perhaps some of the egg sacs. But that's how a gastrocantha would use its silk in addition to the web you see here, and then how I just described the male, and then you can see the egg sac. Okay, a fun story about reproduction. There, again, so many things I can talk about with reproduction and stories of what they do to be successful. And so I just chose two that I thought were really cool that I'm showing you here and describing here. First of all, we have to remember an anatomical part called the pedipalp. The pedipalp, and I'll point them out here, in this female are right here. Whoops, sorry about that. And then in this male, you can kind of see it right here to the side, and then the other one right here. And then in this female down here, this is the female pedipalp. And it's not in focus because that's not the point of the photo, but I'll just highlight this is the pedipalp in the male. So that's one side, you can't really see the other side. So in photo A, the female on the right, notice how she's bigger. That's typical in the spider world. Just like in the human world, we have to be bigger because we carry the eggs, right? So she's usually bigger. Sometimes they're different colors. Sometimes they're similar, like in the previous slide. This is a type of nursery web spider, Passera mirabilis. And what's happening here is the male has produced a silk wrapped gift, and that gift is a prey item that he presents to the female. And if she accepts this prey item as a nuptial gift, is what it's called, then he will proceed to mate with her. In the bottom picture, again, the male is on the right in this one, the female's on the left. And this is a really cool example of a nuptial gift. He does the same thing where he's presenting a nuptial gift and it's food, but in this case, it is a rival male that he has won out. He's won the battle, and he's now presenting the rival male as food to the female. So again, if she accepts this, what he will do, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute so y'all can see me. So what he will do is he will take his swollen ends of his pedipalps where he has stored the sperm. All right, so let me stop right there. Let me explain a little further. So the pedipalps are positioned in the same position where antennae are, and they're used for similar purposes. But what he does in his penultimate molt, which is his molt before he's completely sexually mature, is he molts a bulbous end to his pedipalp. Before this, his pedipalps would have just been like the females, where you don't notice anything different in that last segment. But he molts this bulb, and he uses that new space in that bulb at the end of his pedipalp to fill it with sperm. So he puts the sperm in there, and then he molts one more time. So to make an example of the gastrocantha, the spiny orb weaver, that's probably when the male is hanging next to the female as he's waiting to become sexually mature and bide his time till she's ready to mate with him. Because after his ultimate molt, he's ready. Not only does he have the sperm already in his last segment of his pedipalp, but what they often do as well is they molt spurs or extensions of their exoskeleton that are like claws, where they, when they insert their pedipalps into the female's gonopores, which is just the slit where her eggs are stored, if they have hooks and they put the pedipalps in, those hooks help keep the pedipalp in place for longer so that more of his sperm come out and fertilize her eggs. Incredible. I hope y'all think it's incredible too. Okay, so back to this. And again, like I said, there's all kinds of other stories about this. These are just two, but there's strategies, is what I like to call them, reproductive strategies for successfully mating, because we all have heard about the black widow and how she gets her name. All spiders will be opportunistic feeders and will take advantage of eating their males if they're hungry and if they deem it, valuable to their existence. So keep that in mind. So I've shown you a couple of egg sacs, and so I thought I would just to show you there's, oh my gosh, so much diversity among spider egg sacs, from this what's known as a fulcid spider right here, holding her eggs with a very, very thin layer of silk around it to hold them in place, holding it with her chelicerae. Same thing happens in the nursery web spiders. You can see the nursery web female here holding on to her egg sac in her chelicerae, to not holding them, but maybe in this case with the green lynx spider, just standing over it and protecting it. But you can definitely see diversity in the silk, in the way in which they wrap it, in the coloration of it, etc. So there's just a few to show you some variation. And of course, that all the different groups are incredibly different in what they do. But nonetheless, in the life cycle, after that egg sac is laid and the spiders emerge, often depending on which spider it is that is going through the cycle, often the female's already dead. The male's already dead because he usually dies soon after mating because he's just exhausted and put all his energy into that. But most spiders do not provide parental care at all. There are exceptions. And so here on the left, hopefully you recognize that as being a female wolf spider. And what the wolf spiders do is they carry their egg sac with their spinnerets around for a while. And once the young spiderlings are ready to emerge, they molt inside of that egg sac, and then they crawl out and they get on her abdomen, and she carries them around for a while. So right here, you're looking at a lateral view, a side view of the wolf spider with all of her babies on her back. And they will stay there for a good while she protects them until they grow and develop a little bit more, and then they will go off on their own. The picture on the right shows another example of a sort of, I'll put it in quotes, parental care, because this spider laid this egg sac, and this is another example of a nursery web spider. It laid the egg sac and built what's known as a nursery web. If you look around here, you see all kinds of silk in and out of focus in that picture. So she puts the egg sac into some vegetation. She makes a nursery web around it to where when they emerge out, usually during the next season, they have a place that is secure and safe to emerge before they go off on their own. She does that, just to backtrack a minute, she does that and then she makes that and then she dies. But they are set up for success in the future, assuming something doesn't destroy that nursery web. So there's a wide range of how they try to set their young up for success. Who eats spiders? What are their predators? Well, this is just a fun picture that I did not take, but I don't know the source of it. So if anybody knows it, I'm happy to add it here. But this is a fan-tailed warbler for all you people who love birds. Y'all are definitely putting a dent in the spider population, which is okay. But definitely birds eat spiders. Another example are insects. And so this is a really great picture that a former student of mine took of a blue mud dauber actually capturing and about to envenomate a spider. And so blue mud daubers and other mud daubers, which are species of wasps, are called that because they make, well, this one's called the blue mud dauber for its coloration, but mud daubers make homes out of mud. And so they have different ways of doing this, and it helps the different shape of the different muddy homes help you identify, in some cases, the insect that made it. But the really cool thing in the association here is that when they grab a spider, they will paralyze it. They don't kill it, they paralyze it. And so when they paralyze it, they then fly it back to their home, one of these chambers, where they put a spider or more into a chamber and lay one of their eggs onto the spider, so that when the mud dauber egg hatches out into the larval stage, they have immediate food to eat so that they can grow and develop. And they do all of that growing and developing inside of this tiny chamber, and then they will emerge as adult mud daubers, and of course instinctively know to do the same thing to carry on their genes and to keep the species going. So this is a picture of a mud dauber home that I found, where I was able to easily get it off of the structure it was on, and you can see all the spiders that are in there. And these were all done. You could actually see some of the pupa from the mud daubers. But really cool thing to do if you're ever out there and you find one of these and you want to just see, is it active? Is it not active? What does it look like? What kind of spiders are in there? All kinds of cool things you can learn about it. So those are some of the spider predators. Other spider predators are other spiders. So here's two examples. This is on the left is a pelican assassin spider, not from Louisiana, from Madagascar. but it's a really cool spider that I like to use when I'm teaching students about spiders because it's anatomically just bizarre. You see its abdomen right here, and then this is its cephalothorax. And these are its chelicerae with its fangs in that tiny spider. So it has, and these are the legs. It has evolved this really long neck region of its cephalothorax to compensate for these really long jaws that they use to grab, assassinate, as they call it, other spiders. So if you Google assassin spiders, you'll see some cool photos. And then one that we have locally that are really hard to find, but we do have them, are called pirate spiders. So Mimetus is the genus of the pirate spiders that we have in Louisiana. And so they will also eat other spiders, which is why they're called pirate spiders. And then what do, of course, spiders eat? I mentioned earlier about the fishing spider eating small fish and perhaps salamanders. They definitely eat, they're opportunistic in most cases. Most of them are not specialists. They're opportunistic, that they're gonna do what they can to eat what comes their way, usually some form of soft-bodied insect. And so this is a typical view of the group of spiders known as the crab spiders. They love to hang out in the inside of a flower. And they like to hang out there because, of course, they know that pollinators are going to come by. And so they sit very crab-like in wait for the prey to come up to pollen, or to get pollen and to do different things. And then they, the unsuspecting fly in this case gets collected and eaten. So you can see the pedipalp resting over it, and then that's the base of the chelicera right there. Here's the cephalothorax, here's the abdomen. And a lot of times these crab spiders mimic the flowers on which they live. So if that fascinates you and you're really into plants and things like that, you can Google crab spiders and mimicry or camouflage, and you'll see lots of cool examples. This is that same jumping spider I showed you earlier eating that fruit fly. So that's definitely prey. And then this picture's, I think, pretty cool. My uncle is a prairie biologist, worked for USGS. He's retired now, Larry Allanth, and y'all know Larry. He captured this photo and shared it with me. He, of course, was out there taking pictures of plants and happened to get this green lynx spider eating this carpenter bee. And so to him, it's a plant picture. To me, it's a spider picture, of course. So that's an example of another species we have locally, Pashuta viridans, that will definitely eat insects. Okay, so another fun story to tell you about, again, just the tip of the iceberg of cool associations other than what I've talked about. This is one that I thought you might come across and see this spider in certain scenarios because they're plentiful in our state, because they have relationships, or what are known as symbiotic associations, with one of our most popular and populous spider, the golden silk spider. It's really hard to photograph them because they're very small and they're always in the web of another spider. And so you can kind of see, I still use this picture even though it's out of focus, because you can see a silver color back here, which is a spider. And then you can kind of get this view right here, if you look close enough, of a silver color and some legs. But to the right is an actual in focus, nice picture of this spider called the dewdrop spider. And they, Argyrodes elevatus is the name of it, the scientific name, and they are kleptoparasites. So they don't build their own webs. They live in the webs of other spiders, often the golden silk spider, like I mentioned. So always look in the golden silk spider web for these smaller metallic abdomen colored spiders. And they steal little giblets and just prey that the bigger spider has dropped. So these are a small spider, but you can see them now if you have a search image for them, and you go and try to find them. Okay, let's get to the meat of this. A little bit about I obviously want to talk about the specific Louisiana spiders, show you some examples. But before I do that, let me get to the meat of where you find them. Like when you're looking for spiders, where do you look? How do you find them? And so a lot of times people associate spiders with webs, which is a good thing to do because that's, well, we all saw or read Charlotte's Web, so we know that, but definitely that's what stands out to us. I've already mentioned they don't all live in webs, but all produce some kind of silk. But the reason I want to show you this here is you can see variety of the different, these are genus names of some of the common spiders. So if that's your thing, that's what you love, you can look it up and you can see these different shapes and this image in particular. But I want to show you this because a recent, pretty recent publication that came out did a good job of helping us group spiders based on the guild that they live in. And what that means is how they hunt and how they capture their prey. So the Cardosa, you can just Google Cardosa 2011 and you can find this information. But the way that they've done this, I try in this the next couple of photos to associate it with the spider that we have here so that it helps you with your search image of looking for things, because the big obvious orb weaver on the right here with the big obvious spider is what we always notice because it's big and obvious. So that's our common yellow garden spider, which I'm sure you've all seen before. If not, go out and find them this weekend because they're out there right now. And this is when they're usually at the height of their season, which is why this talk is in September, is because this is when you get all the really nice size adults, yellow garden spiders and others. So so that is a guild called an orb web weaver, and there are lots of examples. It's a big group, a big guild, and a big family of spiders that are the orb web weavers. And so they weave an orb shaped web. So as you're learning and studying these, in the meantime, between going out in nature, you can then compare to some of the different structures that you see here. So this would be an example of an orb web. This would be an example of an orb web. And some others look like the shape of an orb web, but the orientation is different. So they're in their own guild, which makes it a little harder to follow, but definitely something that is doable. But an orb, that's the shape of that web. In the middle here is an example of what we call sheet web weavers. This is a lot of families of spiders. One of the more commonly seen ones are the funnel web spiders that you see here in the leaves of a tree. And so we all have seen this before, I'm sure. If not, look in the leaf. When you see silk in a tree, no matter what species it is, go look for a funnel shape. Or at the base of a tree is usually where you find them as well. They always have a funnel that leads into a retreat so that they can get away from anything that might want to get them. The other place you can find sheet web weavers is in the morning in a field or in your yard when you have really good dew on the ground. And you can go up, and some of them are very small, but you can still, when they stand out with the dew on them, you can definitely tell that they are sheet web weavers and what that means. Over here, this is what's called a sensing web weaver. And this is in the handrail at Jean Lafitte National Park. And we tend to find these usually on human structures. This is a tube web spider. At night, it comes out and you see its little legs out, and it puts its legs on the end of the web, and it senses for any kind of critter walking by, and it reaches out, grabs it, and pulls it back in. There are also space web weavers, ambush hunters, and ground active hunters. So the space web weavers are what we call the house spiders. So a brown widow spider is an example of this. It's what we also call a cobweb. There's no symmetry at all to a space web weaver's web. Ambush hunters sit and wait. In this case, the six-spotted fishing spider is hanging out on some vegetation with its front set of legs on water, waiting for vibration of something falling out of a tree above or something swimming below. And then, of course, the wolf spiders are ground active hunters, and they're just going to move around until they find and can attack their prey. Other active hunters, this is an example of the jumping spider. So I showed you the image earlier of how they attach silk to a structure once they're jumping. These are really cool. They can jump 50 times their body length just by the hydrostatic force of the blood and all the fluids they have on the inside of their bodies. Oh my gosh, super cool. And then of course, spider hunters are another guild, and the pirate spider is an example of that. Okay, so I have about 10 minutes left, and I want to leave time for questions and answers at the end. But the next couple of slides I've arranged based on the common spiders you might encounter in Louisiana. It by no means includes all of them, but I tried to, look at the maps around the state and see, from the northwest to the northeast through central and then down into South Louisiana, where I've done most of my work. And so to kind of show you a variety of some of these very common spiders in our state. So this is this is one I've already shown you, but this is a slide I put together to show you some more diversity of their colors. So these are the two pictures I showed you earlier of family Arachnology. That's the family this belongs to. It is an example of an orb web weaver, and its scientific name is Gastrocantha cancroformis. Common name, spiny orb weaver. And there are other common names as well. I've just given one for each of these just so you can see, but you can look in the books and see other colloquial names and common names. So again, these are females, and that's the male right here. So you get variety in the coloration of the females, and we don't know why. If you know of a paper that's come out recently that tells us why there's variation, that'd be awesome. But so far, every time I look, we don't know. It's just a genetic diversity within the species. So that is the spiny orb weaver. Another common spider in that same group is what's known as Neoscona crucifera. In the books, you see it as the spotted orb weaver. I like to call it the fleur-de-lis spider, even though you're never going to see that anywhere in a book. But when you look at it, and usually depending on the color and the way the sun is hitting the spider or the moonlight, because these actually are often out at night, you can see what looks like a fleur-de-lis right here. But it also could be a cross, which is why it's crucifera. So these are that's the dorsal view, and then this is the ventral view. Oftentimes, in order to positively identify this, if the fleur-de-lis isn't real obvious, like it isn't in this one, you have to be able to see these orangish colors on its femurs. And then you also have to look at the ventral surface, which is why I have this photo here, because these spots help identify that spider. But this is a spider that a lot of times you go out at night and it's there, and then the next morning it's gone. This is an example of a spider that eats its silk every morning in order to recycle and reuse the silk protein to use it the next day. So I think that's a pretty cool characteristic of that group. Here's the big one. This is the biggest spider we have in the state. This is Trichonephila clavipes. It is the golden silk spider. Do not call it a banana spider. We can't call it that. There's other things that are called that. So as a naturalist, this is golden silk spider. I'm a terrible photographer, so I have photos from other people here showing a little bit of why it's called golden silk, but it's really hard to photograph. But when you're in nature and you see this and you get the sunlight just right, you're going to see why it's called golden silk spider. So this is the female right here. And this is one of my former students who's in our Master Naturalist chapter in New Orleans, took this photo in Mobile of it eating an insect. And this is the male up above. So he's much smaller, and he often hangs out in her web along with those kleptoparasites that I showed you earlier. This is just a fun photo that my former student took of me in the field while we were out collecting spiders one day. And it just shows you, well, it doesn't even do it justice of how big the webs are, but the webs can stretch, across paths of nature trails and things like that. So hopefully you've seen these before. If not, get out and look up at this time of year. They start off the year pretty small. These are what we call annual spiders. So they only live for 1 year. The female emerges in like March, April time, and they spend all summer eating and getting fat and growing and developing. And then in the fall is when they reproduce, and then they lay their egg sac, and then they die. This is a picture from another former student that took this same species in Panama. You can see the abdomen of the female, and this is actually a male right here attempting to mate with her while she eats. So their strategy for reproduction is sneak attack. While she's eating, he's on the other side of the web and hoping to inseminate her, which would happen right in this area of her abdomen. Another spider I showed you a minute ago, and one you cannot call a banana spider anymore. These are the yellow garden spiders, or the black and yellow garden spiders. On the left is an adult female that that's right outside of my bedroom window, which I thought was a really cool thing to watch for several months. And then the photo on the right is of the same species when it's younger. And so one of the things I want to point out is a lot of times we notice these spiders because they're big, but also because they build that stable momentum in the middle of their web. As young spiders, they're usually really near the ground, and they build their stable momentum to cover their entire bodies to protect themselves. They also have a really cool behavior where they make the web shake really fast back and forth in order to confuse a potential predator. And you can Google that and watch that as well. It's pretty neat thing to do to protect themselves. Okay, new family, Tetragnathid. Tetragnathid means big jaws, or long-jawed orb weavers. These are a species that is everywhere in our state, Leucage venusta, orchard spider, and you can find them always in an orb-shaped web, but it's not an orb weaver. It's because the way they orient their web is always at like a 45-degree angle. And that is every one I've ever seen in my life. It follows that pattern. So start looking for that. When you first walk up to these, a lot of times people think it's a black widow because they see something dark if the light isn't just right, and they'll see some orange markings on the abdomen. But when you get light on it really well, you'll notice that there actually are different silvers, oranges, yellows, greens associated with this spider. Pretty spider, common spider. A relative of the long-jawed orb weaver is the Tetragnathid elongata, another the common name long-jawed spider, same name as the family name. And this is a male. You can actually see the long jaws, that's the cheliceraal base, and then the fang. And you can actually see the pedipalp swollen right here as well. And then this is its typical pose, and they're always around water. So they're the ones who are going to build the webs near water. These are the ones that are going to fall in your canoe or your kayak, and they're going to be all awkward walking around because they're not used to walking on something other than their web. And so a lot of times people who spend a lot of time in canoes will really know this species. The jumping spiders, there's a huge suite of individual jumping spiders. They're in the family Salticidae, and Louisiana has a lot of these. Saltatory means jumping, and so that's how they get their name. This is one that's very common. I find it a lot on vegetation like ginger and cannas and things like that. So look on the underside of your gingers and cannas for green magnolia spiders, jumping spiders. Sylvana jumping spider is a really incredible color. Sometimes this is a really bright orange. Colonus sylvanus is the scientific name, and they're often found in wooded environments. And then the tan jumping spider, this is a picture I took at Audubon Park on a handrail, but this is the species you always see on the side of buildings crawling all around. So look for those. They are plentiful throughout our state. And then two other plentiful jumping spiders that look very similar at first until you find the diagnostic feature, which is when you look directly into the face of the bold jumping spider, you will see this iridescent greenish bluish color. This is Phytobus audax. A lot of people will keep these as pets because they're just, they seem to have a lot of personality, I'll just say. And then the twin flag jumping spider is a cool one. A lot of people notice this as well because this portion of their pedipalp has a white dot on it, and that's why it's called twin flagged. And when they move their pedipalps up and down, which they often do, it's real obvious that it's moving around because of that white spot that they have. Okay, a couple more. I'm wrapping it up. This is a group of the Theridiidae. These are the house spiders I mentioned earlier. They make a cobweb, and so you can really see that cobweb here. No symmetry at all. This is the one that is native to our area, the black widow spider. Of course, it is of medicinal concern because they do have venom that is toxic to humans. They produce a neurotoxin. And then the newer one species that is in the same genus is Latrodectus geometricus. This is the brown widow spider, originally from Africa, South Africa, and has come over to the United States. And we did a study on them at Audubon Park a few years ago. And so this is one of our females that we reared. And then you can really tell the egg sac from anything else because it's the only egg sac that looks spiky like this one here. And I include this bottom picture just so you know, usually when there's one egg sac, there are a lot of them. And so this is another spider of a little bit of medicinal concern because they too have a neurotoxin, but there's absolutely no papers published about them biting humans. So in the medical journals or otherwise. A couple other of their relatives that you might find. This is the triangulate cobweb spider. I have these all over my front door, and they're really small. So I showed you big pictures so you can, like you were looking through a loop at it, but you can find them because they have a cobweb, and this is what their egg sacs look like. And they tend to like human structures. That's just what I've observed. It doesn't mean they always have to be found there, but that's where I find them in urban settings. And then another one that we find in our homes often is this common house spider. Again, usually up in the corner in a cobweb. I leave them in my house because they eat mosquitoes and other things that come in. So these are, to me, part of my pest control. And then, of course, some wolf spiders. One picture on the left of a female taken by fellow Master Naturalist in our chapter, Mark Meunier. And then Catherine Gividen, who's in the Baton Rouge chapter, shared this photo with me and gave me permission to show it. I don't know what species it is. I put a question mark there because you have to be able to look at certain characteristics to positively ID them. And I'm not a specialist on wolf spiders. So that's my best guess at what that species is. But nonetheless, a wolf spider, very common, always on the ground, always hunting and in hunting pose. They're also the ones that you can put a flashlight up next to your eye and look around at night for eye shine. Always something fun to do. Their close relative, the fishing spiders, are shown here. This is the same species I showed you earlier that naturalist in New Orleans, James Beck, took. The six-spotted, even though they have more than 6 spots, it's called the six-spotted fishing spider. And this is in hunting mode. And then here's a big Dolomedes, so same genus. Again, can't positively ID it because I need to see the back of its head. But this is one holding her egg sac. And then this is one a student of mine took a few years ago at Jean Lafitte that I think is a cool photo, even though you don't see the spider perfectly well, but I love how it blends in. This was just on the handrail. And every time I go to Jean Lafitte and walk along the Coquille Trail at night, you will find these resting on the handrails like this. So really, I mean, fail safe to go and out there and find them. But that's the white-banded fishing spider. Okay, so I skipped over this because I'm out of time, but a lot of people are interested in brown recluses. And this is a species, again, of medicinal concern because they produce a venom that is a hemotoxin or a tissue. Hema means tissue toxin. And so they necrose the tissue where they've bitten. A lot of things that are non-spider related get blamed on this spider. oftentimes it's more like an MRSA infection or some kind of infection. But this is definitely another spider with a diagnostic feature of a violin shape, which is why they're also known as the violin spider. That if you know this spider, you know the two widows, that's all you have to worry about as far as those that can potentially harm you as a human. So they're not after you. They don't want to bite you. They don't consider you prey. But if they are disturbed and they do feel threatened, of course, they will protect themselves. So that was fun. And that brings me to the end. And I would love to entertain any questions if anybody has any, or hear any stories or anything that if you want to share. I see the chat. Oh, Steve Wolf had to leave. Okay, bye, Steve Wolf.
I have a question. All the time when you're discussing the spinnerets and the making of the silk, at least in the picture that you gave, it showed the female anatomy. The males are usually smaller in most cases with spiders. And oftentimes, like you showed with the orb weavers, the males are usually hanging out on the same web as the females. Do the males help with the making of the web? I know they have the spinnerets too, or is it mainly a female's job for making the web?
Yeah, so spiders they don't really live, they're solitary organisms, let me just say. The females tolerate the males when it's time to mate, because we don't know why. Obviously, it has to do with survival of the fittest and passing on those genes, but there's that's why reproductive strategies are so fascinating to me, because the males have figured out a way to get in and to reproduce so that the species carry on. The males can make silk, but they're usually not the ones studied because, and I hate to say it, but they're considered degenerate in this group of organisms, because they basically live long enough to find a mate, figure out a way for her to choose him, and then mate, and then they usually die. That's why when you see a male, especially like in the wolf spiders or something else, they're missing legs. They look real skinny. They're not really focused on eating. They usually look pretty rough if you want to think about it and you want to compare it to the females. The females are sitting there just doing what female spiders do, which is eat and poop and eat and poop. Basically just live their lives and try to survive. So that's usually why you would see the female. And that's why I usually say her, because most of the individuals you see, especially the big healthy ones in the webs, are females.
Okay, any other questions?
I wondered, their behavior then is all genetically determined, instinctive, or is there a learning component? Do we know about
No.
that?
Yeah, there's nature and there's nurture. In this case, it's mostly nature, because they, usually don't have any parental care at all. And so we don't know if the wolf spider is that exception I showed you, where the female carries around the young for a while. We don't know if they're learning from her or not. We're not that advanced in our studies on that yet to know. And so I wish I knew, but it's mostly nature. It's mostly from it's instinct. And I mentioned that they're opportunistic eaters, and they're going to take advantage of what they can when they can.
Amazing.
Okay, you had a question?
Is it on?
Yes.
So have you noticed, or is there anything studies showing if there's been any changes in what spiders are where based on climate change?
Wonderful.
Yeah, so one of the things that that I'm interested in is seeing these tropical species move further north. And that's, I mentioned at the very beginning about iNaturalist. So I don't know that anybody is particularly focused on that right now, but I know that others in the field are interested in using citizen science to help us understand and be able to answer that question. So for instance, the ogre-faced spider tends to be a tropical species. And so I had a colleague from Georgia reach out a few years ago asking me if I'd ever found any in Louisiana, which I have not. But I was in Mississippi prior to coming here, and I did a lot of spider walks and work there, and I had found them there. So we put out a paper based on the one individual I found in Mississippi, and then based on other people's posts on iNaturalist. So, I mean, it is a valid, so, I mean, this whole BioBlitz is important because it is a valid source for studying something like you're suggesting. We think that the brown widow that has come in, it happened way before. They were introduced into South Florida a long time ago. We don't know exactly when, and that's actually something that a student and I are studying right now. We're trying to find any references on the brown widow's first existence in southeastern United States. And I mentioned Zach Lemon earlier, and then I also showed a picture from James Beck. Those are two naturalists that I ask questions about like this, you know, about spiders and stuff often. And so we discuss them and try to figure things out. None of us really know exactly when, because nobody published the first time they found it. But Zach really remembers, and James too, seeing the brown widows in higher numbers after Hurricane Katrina. So there could be a connection with winds and with, you know, they can disperse in the air. That's one thing I didn't mention, but when they can release their silk, and you often will see like just a silken strand going across in front of you if you're out on the water or even just walking across a field. That is typically a spider that is dispersing through the air. So what they do is they raise their abdomen up a little bit and they release silk and they let the air take them. And that's one of the ways that they disperse, whether on purpose, you know, to spread out from where they were born, or like sometimes in a storm will, you know, take them, kind of like birds, you know, like we find tropical birds here. We just found frigate birds a few days ago from Hurricane Francine.
Wow.
Yeah. This was a fun way to spend a Saturday morning. Thank y'all for joining.
Well, thank you for doing this for us. We're really appreciative.
Oh,
And looks like we have lost her.
did we lose her?
It looks like.
Oh.
Oh, there
All
she
right,
is.
I lost y'all
Okay.
for a minute, but I'm back.
We really appreciate you doing this for us.
Glad I could be here, and I'm glad you recorded it because I know that there are still some people in our area that don't have power. I'm lucky that I've got mine back late yesterday, so I'm happy to be able to do this morning.
So another question.
Okay.
I mean, I know you showed us a couple of books earlier. Is there anyone that you would suggest to use for younger persons? Because I know a lot of people are afraid of spiders, for example, and I think they're not really very introduced to them as a young age, and so they just think of them as something scary.
Yeah.
Is there something that would be good?
Yeah, so you can, if you just Google spider books for young adults or young people, for children, there are lots of things out there now that try to paint, illustrate, you know, their importance and why they're good. There's also, if you Google Lucas the spider, there's an animated jumping spider that my college students told me about a few years ago that they said helped them lighten up to spiders because it gives this persona of, you know, this really good Lucas the spider. And so they said that made them change their minds about spiders.
Got it.
Yep. And there's also, I mean, all kinds of my social media feed is filled with people who raise and talk about spiders. I've got Tiana the bug lady is a fun one if you want to follow somebody. She keeps these jumping spiders, and she makes blankets for them, like that big, that small. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous what you can find out there now, but also very it makes me happy because there are people out there who appreciate the critter that's been reviled for so long.
Yeah, I did a similar project with snakes a few years ago, and people are still wanting me to do that presentation.
Cool. I'd love to see it too.
Can you show her my spider that I found?
Oh, Susan wanted to share with you the spider that she found at Black Bayou last weekend.
Okay.
Not the best picture, but
It's maybe a little bit out of focus, but
Oh yeah, that's
there.
the same. Yep, that's a wolf spider, and I believe that's a Rabbita rabidosa. It's called the rabid wolf spider.
the rabid wolf spider.
Well, yes, I know. There's a lot of talk about why it was given that name initially, that common name, but I'm pretty sure that's what species that is. I'm not real good with wolf spiders. I haven't spent a lot of time on them, but I did identify a couple of my wolf spiders recently that I found, and they were that species. So I think it's that white line that's on its cephalothorax, and then you see that red on the side of its chelicera right there. Is a diagnostic feature. Yep, right there.
All I know
Cool,
is it's about 8 inches of spread or so. It was big.
Yes, that's one of our biggest ground dwelling spiders that we have.
That's great.
Okay, do we have any other questions or observations or?
All right,
I could ask you.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned
ahead, Amy.
citizen science. Okay, you mentioned citizen science. Do you have projects going right now that involve citizen science?
Well, so not specifically. I'm trying to think if I'm doing it in my class this semester. I often involve my students in those projects. I'm not doing any, well, the research I'm doing right now involves looking at the brown widows that I mentioned a minute ago, because we did a study on them a few years ago, and we're trying to wrap up that paper so we can get it published. And so I will use citizen science, but I'm not actually doing a project with that right now, but I'll use it to find out where they have been positively identified and people have found them. I contribute to a BioBlitz that I have on my campus because we're also studying the flora and fauna on our campus. And so that's pretty much it that I have going on right now.
Thank you.
I'm in writing mode right now, so I got to write about all my studies I've done recently. But then we will ramp it up again because I absolutely I use Seek by iNaturalist pretty much every day of my life because I'm curious about what I see in my yard, what I see on my way to work, that kind of stuff.
Sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I do want to remind everybody that we do have the Spiders BioBlitz on iNaturalist this weekend. Basically, any observations of spiders in Louisiana that are uploaded this weekend will be added to that project. And it's running today and tomorrow.
Right.
So go out and observe some spiders.
Or go in your house and observe some bug, right?
Yes.
Yep, thanks a lot. That was a great presentation.
So when's the advanced class?
You set it up and I'll be there.
All right. We'll have to do that.
All right.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Maria.
thank you for participating, everyone. It was good to see you this morning. We had a really great morning. I think this is going really great.
Awesome.
Is there anything
Thank
else
you.
you want to,
Is there anything else you'd like to speak to us about?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.